And as we fade out there on the late, great Freddie Hubbard, folks, welcome to a special edition of the Jake Feinberg Show. And Freddie was an interesting cat, but what he did know how to do was surround himself with young, talented players. And when this radio host first got on board with music, one of the first albums he discovered was a Freddie Hubbard album called Keep Your Soul Together, with a bunch of unsung heroes like George Cables and Junior Cook and Kent Brinkley, and my guest today, drummer Ralph Penland. Freddie Hubbard knew that it was important to get the sound out of younger cats who would be able to then have a career. That is non-existent in today's business world of music. My guest today epitomized the greatest era of music in the sense that he had the freedom to play what he felt and bond with the people that he played with. It's an honor to welcome Ralph Penland to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Hello, how you doing?
It's nice to talk to you, my friend, and I must give a tip of the cap to Dave Mackay, who passed along your contact information. I didn't think that this day would ever come, but I'm glad it did.
Oh, all right. Well, my pleasure. My pleasure.
So, Ralph, let's talk a little bit about, when you were younger, growing up, what were the kind of, I hate to attach labels to music, but if you could, what kind of music were you brought up with?
All kinds of music. My father had a great record collection, and he was always listening to big bands like Count Basie, and he loved Jimmy Smith, a lot of organ music. There was music all around the house, and I was the youngest of three, so they came before me, my older sister and my older brother, and they both were involved in music, taking it in school and bringing their instruments home to practice. My older brother was into jazz, and I remember him practicing and playing a lot of crazy music, and I'm like, man, what is that? What is that you're playing? He said, it's jazz. He said, and once you get older, you might get into it, and you might, like it as well. So there was a lot of music around. I'm originally from Ohio, Cincinnati, Ohio.
You were from Cincinnati, so there was also, at that time, I remember speaking to a drummer, Jimmy Madison, and he talked about, the King record label was across the river in Kentucky. With James Brown, there was a big soul scene down there, too.
Oh, most definitely. We would see James Brown walking down the streets sometimes.
Okay, so here we get to the idea that Wes Montgomery would stop a musician, even if he saw somebody had an instrument in their hand, he would stop them in New York City and ask them who they were and what they were doing. And here you're talking about James Brown, who, we know his music. My generation knows his music. We might have seen him do his greatest hits, in a half-hour concert or something. But literally, you'd see him unattached, walking down the street, just hanging out.
Sure.
If, as best you could, as a young man growing up in society, to be able to see your heroes in such a accessible light. They weren't with entourages. They weren't in bubbles. They were part of society. At the time, did it make you feel? Did it give you more hope? Did it even register with you, or how did it make you feel?
Yeah, well, you definitely felt good, to see someone that had great popularity and respect, and we knew about King Records being in the Cincinnati area, and he was quite a hero to all of us. So we saw him and said, "Hey, how's it going?" And it was a great honor and a pleasure.
So you grew up, and at the time, the term, this might be too broad-based a question, but the term jazz, that was already, what did that mean exactly? What did that mean in terms of music? Did it mean free-form music, or was it attached to big band stuff like Basie or Louis Armstrong? I mean, did it have associations attached to it?
Not really. I mean, it was definitely different from pop music or R&B music and classical music. We all knew what jazz was, and there were many different types of jazz, so we all were aware of jazz, and a lot of the musicians all respected jazz, for what it was. A different type of music, and very well respected.
Let me ask you, why was it respected?
It was respected because the people who was playing jazz, the people we saw playing jazz, were also respected. They all had a name for themselves. There was a big jazz scene in Cincinnati, so a lot of people knew where to go to hear jazz. So that was a big thing. There were a lot of jazz musicians. There were clubs that featured jazz, and it was just as popular in its own way as was, the R&B scene. Yeah, very well respected.
And in some ways, there was an overlap between the soul scene and the jazz scene too, which would, you might call that fusion. But in the evolution of jazz, that there was sort of an overlap between those two styles.
Most definitely. But at that time, it was all just relative. It was all just good music. So we had as much fun hearing jazz, listening to jazz, as we did knowing about like James Brown or music like that. It was just all it was a good music scene, and you were just happy to be a part of it. Yeah. And
even, if you would, from your own perspective, talk about the tenor of the. We are living in such a kind of a diabolical, media-driven time now. It's very cynical, and I don't doubt for a minute that Cincinnati was a hotbed of racial strife. It was one of the more racist. It's known as one of the more racist cities in the country. But from your perspective, did you grow up? Why were people not as cynical, even though we've made progress along the lines of tolerance of all people? I mean, we don't have owners of towns anymore, like in Texas where Joe Sample grew up, and the owner of that town wouldn't allow Chicago blues into the town. We've progressed. But we're more cynical as a society now than we've ever been. And yet, I don't make any illusions that you didn't experience racism as a young man. But was society as cynical, or was there more positivity and hope because of leadership?
Well, I would say definitely it was less cynical, but at the same time, I was at a very young age, so I wasn't exposed to the hard political strife or the crime-driven circumstances of certain areas. I just wasn't at that point, to be a young man. And I left Cincinnati at the age of 18. So I left very early, and I just wasn't, I don't know, in the hotbed of it, or specifically being directly involved in it.
And
it was a different time, and I was so involved in music, and there weren't those type of stresses involved in going to a club, or a musical concert or something like that. That was less politically involved. Just enjoying music, being around music.
And your folks really instilled in you the values of staying on the right path. I mean, obviously you found they encouraged your passion for music.
Yes, because it was all around. Like I said, I'm the youngest of three, so it was way around and in the house before I was even, on the planet. So I was just kind of joined in and just become a part of it. I was influenced by my older brother and my sister and my father, the music that they played, and it was a wonderful time. I can't talk any more about the time. It was just great, and it was a very early time. Again, I stress I was, I left when I was 18, and I moved to Boston at 18, And people have since asked me, well, Ralph, how did you deal with the racial tone or the different experiences that were in Boston? I said, I did not experience that. At the time, I did not know that there was certain areas that were, racially motivated, or it was highly this or that. Again, it was that music scene, and being a teenager and, being very seriously into the music.
I would actually just color that in by saying you were dealing with real people on an everyday basis because of the music, and there was an intimate quality to that. Whereas now, with the media the way it is and the accessibility to information, I think we are overly driven by we are given too much information now, and as a result, you're more aware of these things. Whereas before, you would show up and you would do a gig, and maybe you would stay for 6 or 7 nights and play 6 or 7 nights and take your instruments back to the hotel and play after the shows and get to know the local townspeople intimately. Therefore, you weren't really tapped into it, as opposed to sitting and streaming some cable news show about the supposed vitriol in this neighborhood or that.
Yes, I would agree with you and say you're probably right. I just wasn't tuned in or focused in on like I said, the political climate of situations, or even the racial climate. It was purely musical, purely.
And jazz was really one of the first art forms that incorporated all different types of races. So it wasn't. I mean, you were playing with all different types of people, were you not?
Sure was. No problem. Yeah.
When did you? So talk about getting your first trap set and some of the drummers that you were hip to and that you used to check out in Cincinnati before moving to Boston.
Okay, well, back in Cincinnati, I remember I definitely wanted to get some drums, and at the time, I'm remembering my parents certainly didn't have the money, or they did not want to invest in that, and they were encouraging me to invest in that. If that's something you want to do, you should, have a job. And so I did. I was actually like a local paper guy. I was, delivering papers, and that's how I bought my first set of drums. I saved up some money and bought my first set of drums, and it was great. Yeah, I definitely had more appreciation because I got it myself. And I think I was maybe 9 years old when I hit that paper route. And I may have been 14 or 15 when I first got the set of drums. So probably around the age of 15, I now had a set of drums and was working and practicing. I was in high school, so there was a lot of music and music programs in high school. And so I was involved in that too. Anything related to music, I was certainly trying to be a part of it.
Yeah, talk about your high school band teacher. I mean, when I go back and interview guys like Roy Ayers and from all over the place, I mean, they talk very, very warmly about their high school, the unsung heroes, so the band instructors that taught them the discipline and the passion for music.
Most definitely. We had a teacher in high school, and he had a kind of a name and a reputation because he was a trumpet player, and he played with the Count Basie Orchestra. So he was the head of the music program and music classes, and music was very seasonal. So we had a season where we played big band music. There was a season where we were marching band, and I played in the marching band. And there was a season where we had classical music. There was everything, and this teacher was very well versed. His name is Oscar Gamby Jr., actually, Mr. Gamby.
Yes.
And he taught all the young students that to be a good musician, you really have to know the different music genres. So from an early age on, he was teaching all the students, you have to know about jazz, you have to know about classical music, you have to know about this, when you're playing during the football season, when we had the marching bands. And he was very well versed in educating all the students about being open, being flexible, There was more to music than just, say, for the young kids at that time, say James Brown or Aretha Franklin. There was more to music than just the R&B music, pop music.
It was a, as I coined the phrase, it was a jack of all trades mentality. You know, there was a lot of different. Exactly. Whether it could be folk music, it could be marching band, like you just said, jazz, soul, rock. Although rock was sort of not really prevalent at that point, but you knew how to, you know, those band teachers. Let's just get a time frame here. Was this like the mid? Could you give me a time frame of when this was? Like what year?
I'm going to say maybe around somewhere between 66, 67, up until maybe 1970. I graduated in 71, so between like 66 and 71.
This is the reason that I do the Jake Feinberg show, because of guys like Ralph Penland. The idea that with God-given ability, you graduated high school in 1971, and then you wind up in the studio with guys like Junior Cook and Freddie Hubbard and George Cables 2 years later. I mean, I just that to me seems almost dreamlike.
Well, like I said, there was a very active music scene, and musicians were kind of in tune with trying to be on point in doing things, and we all wanted to advance and do good, and even if that meant going away, which is what I wanted to do. I wanted to leave Cincinnati and try to pursue a more serious scene, more educational scene. That's why I went to Boston. I was attempting to go to Berklee School of Music, and one of the local musicians was going to Berklee, and he had come home for the summer, and he told us he was going to go back in midsummer. And he knew about myself and another guitar player named Aurel Ray.
Oh, I know. He played on that "Keep Your Soul Together."
Yes.
That's beautiful.
But on the actual record, the track that he was on, they did not put out. But when it came out years later on CD, they did include the track that he played on. And so that's on the CD.
It's so interesting.
On the album. But his name was mentioned on the album, but he wasn't playing.
That's so cool, man, because I used to have the CD. I don't remember. There was a bonus track on the CD that wasn't on the album? I guess there must have been if he was. I mean, because anyway, but let's keep going here. Who was so Aurel Ray was the one that came back and to Cincinnati and encouraged you to come to Boston?
No, that was a piano player, Art Matthews.
Okay.
Was his name, Art Matthews. He was the musician that was going to Berklee, and he had come back for the summer because school was out. But he mentioned he was going to go back before September, so he went back in July, and we wanted to go. And we had only just graduated in June. So we graduated whenever, June 15th or whatever. And by, say, July the 4th or 5th, we were in Boston.
Art Matthews
2 weeks out after graduating, we were in Boston.
Art Matthews is still playing, is that correct?
Yes, he's still playing.
I saw him in Tucson maybe a half a year ago with this wonderful woman bass player. And I talked to him. I didn't interview him, but he was one of the first guys before I got on this trip. What a classy guy. What a great man. So July 4th or 5th, did you drive there? Did you take a bus there? How did you get up there?
We drove there because Art had a car and he had driven up to Boston. And so being in Boston, he had transportation to get around, do what he needed to do. And so he came back and he said he was going to drive back up. And if we were interested, he would take us, and we certainly were interested.
And you were not at all concerned about, I mean, it's so funny now, you got the amount of paperwork to enroll at Berklee School of Music, I'm sure, is just eons and eons of paperwork. You'll do it months in advance. And you were just saying to yourself, I've always been surrounded by music. I want to go to a different scene. Maybe it's a more serious scene. I mean, clearly Boston had a great scene. But your intention was also to enroll in school. Is that correct?
Yes, my intention was to enroll in Berkeley and go to school. But I wasn't thinking about paperwork or anything.
You didn't have to.
The whole thing was, the whole thing was about just going, just being adventurous. And back in those times, things were very adventurous for young musicians.
It seems it seems almost dreamlike. So you go up to Boston, and I guess did you crash with Art for a while, or where did you stay?
We did crash with some musicians for a while, but we did immediately we did get an apartment, Aurel and myself, and things were kind of happening pretty quick. There was a lot of music happening, a lot of jam sessions, and we got pretty involved. As a matter of fact, we were playing the first day we got there. We arrived at an apartment with some musicians, and they were all like, "Hey, how you doing? Where's your instruments?" We got to say, "Hey, we got them right here." And I remember we were playing the first day. The music was off and running.
Unbelievable! I mean, what a beautiful free spirit. I mean, and these were just local cats or college guys, and you were you playing live at a club, or were you just jamming in somebody's house?
We were mostly jamming in the house that we were staying in, because it was a house full of musicians, and all these musicians went on to become great performers and players. A keyboard player named Cedric Lawson, who played with Miles Davis and other people. He played piano, he played organ, and of course Art Matthews. There was Billy Pierce, who played with Art Blakey's band, and he played. He actually had a call, but he was a little nervous. He had a call from Miles Davis. He did not accept that offer. Bill Pierce. And great musicians, great. It was just great musicians.
Did you there were some really good. But you actually never. So let's just go through this for history's sake, because this is really important. When did you actually never got to Berklee School of Music? Is that correct?
Well, I got to Berklee, but at the time, what I was zeroing in on, I wanted to study with Alan Dawson,
the drummer.
And so I met Alan Dawson. He was the drum instructor at Berklee, and very well respected. Alan Dawson is credited with being the first drum teacher in Tony Williams' life. And Tony Williams was like a young teenager when he met and studied with Alan Dawson. So that was my real prerequisite. I really wanted to get to Alan, and I found him and approached him and told him I really wanted to study with him. And he was telling me at the time he just did not have the time, because he had so many students, and those students were paying him money.
Mm-hmm.
Back in 1971, I mean, he was getting like maybe $60 an hour, for private students, and he didn't have time for me.
Well, that's a phenomenal wage in 1971.
Most definitely, and he was definitely worth it. He definitely had the reputation.
Sure. And
especially, his greatest student being Tony Williams. Every drummer was like, "What? Tony Williams studied with you? Well, we want to study with you. We want to know what you know."
Right.
And so I was no different. I wanted to get to Alan Dawson.
And so
but at the time, he just told me, "Rob, I just can't do it. I have so many students." He may have had 100 students in 1971 that were paying him money, and but we became good friends, and there was kind of a trade-off. It was kind of like whenever we can get together, whenever we can hang out, and I would go to his jobs and hang out, and we would talk drumming, and it was really great. I even had the pleasure of recommending him for a job. Donald Byrd had come through town, and I recommended Alan, man, you guys should get Alan, and he did the job with Donald Byrd.
Were you?
So it was a trade-off, So music instruction, music learning was still going on, just in another form.
Did you? You were going to places like Lenny's on the Turnpike to see Alan Dawson. Where would you? Where would you go to go see people play?
The local club was the Jazz Workshop, and next door was called Paul's Mall. Those were the two biggest clubs. Lenny's on the Turnpike was quite a ways out, and at that time they were kind of zeroing in on more bigger names and different types of music. They were expanding. They were doing all types of things: pop music, folk music, rock music, as well as jazz.
It was beautiful, and that's one reason I'm so attracted to that time period. Although I will say that I interviewed Fred Taylor. I had the privilege of interviewing Fred Taylor in Boston last summer, and the Jazz Workshop was primarily for jazzers, and yet Paul's Mall was left open to Bob Marley. I think Bob Marley's first North American appearance was at Paul's Mall.
I remember a young Barry Manilow played at Paul's Mall.
A young Barry Manilow, and the way they did it, and this is leading perfectly into the beginning of your professional career. They'd bring in a big name guy. I mean, there's all these. Someone was a genius enough to tape all the stuff that was. I forget the major. Mark Levine told me too, and I can't remember WB. There was a great public radio station there that would broadcast all the stuff coming out of Paul's Mall, and someone was a genius enough to throw an analog tape in and tape a lot of this stuff. And so maybe somebody like Grover Washington Jr. or Donald Byrd would come in to that area, and like you said, they would surround them, maybe not with Alan Dawson, but they'd say, hey, there are some younger cats that are from Berkeley or really good musicians, and they'd take a big name guy and they'd surround him with lesser known cats. That, to me, is why music flourished and why it was so progressive at that time period.
And they had at the Jazz Workshop, they had a series of something set up called the Sunday Afternoon Jazz, where the major artists who were playing, 7 nights a week at the clubs, there would be a Sunday matinee, and that kind of became a thing where it started to open up, where the artists might allow some of the best younger musicians in town, maybe who had a name or reputation, to come and sit in with the band. And that's kind of how it almost happened with me and Freddie Hubbard. We knew he was coming to town, and on the Sunday matinee, we all went down to hear him play, hoping we were going to sit in. On this particular Sunday, though, Freddie was maybe in the mood or something, because he kind of just came from the dressing room and just walked out on stage, and he played the set, and he did not have any musicians play. He just went ahead and played the normal set with his normal band. And as I was telling you earlier, the next week he was going to New York, and the next week I decided to go to New York. I was going to go down and hang out in New York, and I was going to go by the club where I knew he was going to play, and that was partially because I did not get a chance to play and him to hear me, and I was going to, try to make that up, so I was kind of determined in my own way, well, we're going to get together at some point, and then he was playing at the Village Vanguard, and that's where I sat in with him, and ultimately got the call from him.
So just to go back a little bit, you were pretty hip to Freddie. What was your attraction to him before he came? I mean, he was obviously a legend at that point, but he had cut some of those Creed Taylor albums, like Red Clay and stuff, with some of the guys that are in the stratosphere at this point, Herbie and guys like that, and Ron Carter.
Those records were all very popular.
Right, so you were hip to that, and you knew that he was coming to Boston, and then. When he came to the workshop for that Sunday, it was that band included everybody, Ken Brinkley, George Cables, Junior Cook. That was that band.
Yes, it was.
And at any point did those guys kind of look at you and say, Ralph, listen, we'll talk. Why don't you come down? Did they tip you to come to New York too? Because they could feel. I remember you saying to me. They were trying to hip you to Freddie anyway. They were trying to get Freddie to tune into you anyway. So was there? Because it's pretty cool that you decided just to go down to New York anyway. But those guys were in your corner.
Yes, they were. Yeah, I knew Junior Cook because he lived in Boston. He was living in Boston. So when he was with Freddie Hubbard, he lived in Boston, so he knew of me, and I knew of George Cables, and I knew of. I met the bass player, and we became good friends, Kent Brinkley. During that week, I think there was an early Saturday afternoon outdoor jazz concert, and Kent Brinkley and George came to the concert. So they heard me play before that Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was just kind of all interconnected. It was all kind of just falling in place, as it were.
Letting go of control and letting the spirits take over, so to speak.
Yeah.
So talk about...
Very fortunate. I feel very fortunate. It was very fortunate that it all worked out.
I've been to the Vanguard. It's a pretty small, tiny venue. I don't think it's changed much.
Still the same, right?
Still the same. So take us through that scene. You go to New York and there's an empty space at the drum set or when did you get the call to show up that evening, or were you just there and you came up?
Now I'm trying to remember the exact circumstance.
No, I don't want to. I do this to people too much. I don't expect you to be able to recount everything detail for detail. But I guess my question is this: when you went to New York, you didn't know you were going to play.
No, I did not know I was going to play. But it all kind of worked out because the guys in the band knew me. They remembered me from Boston, and they were like, "Oh, Freddie," and they told Freddie, "Here's the guy in Boston we were hoping was going to sit in, and he's now here in New York, so we want you to know that he's here." And so it kind of happened that way. So I was kind of invited to sit in, and I was in the club, and a trombone player that for years was doing the Saturday Night Live, the trombone player, Steve Teray.
Sure.
Yeah, he was there. He was there, and so he could probably tell you his scope on things because he was there hanging out, and I saw him there, and Freddie had us both come up and play. And I remember Freddie asked me, "Well, what do you want to play?" And so I said, "Intrepid Fox." And at that time, that was one of Freddie's hardest tunes. And he's like, "Wow, you want to play my hardest tune?" So he wasn't quite sure about some guy he didn't know and ever heard to play his hardest tune.
Right.
He said, "Well, we'll do this one." So we did a little Sunflower.
Oh, I know that very well.
Yeah, so we played Little Sunflower, and he was very impressed and everything. And he says, "Okay, this guy, he can play." You know? So he said, "Well, we're going to try it then." He said, "You want to do it?" And I said, "Yeah, I've been playing the song. We had been playing the song in Boston. It was one of the songs the musicians who really were into playing. You know, like nowadays people have fake books, and musicians say, "Okay, let's play this song." We were very definitely playing Intrepid Fox, and so we were playing it locally in all the local bands and local jobs, and I loved playing the song, you know, so that's why I told him I wanted to play it, because I loved the song. So it was kind of a regular song to me. I knew the song, loved to play it, and wanted to play it. So then we did play it, you know, and he loved it, and then he called another song, which something he had just written. And it turned out to be the song that when I joined the band, I recorded with them on the Keep Your Soul Together. He said, "Yeah, we're going to try this new song that I just wrote, and it's called Destiny's Children."
Oh, my gosh.
So I was playing it sight unseen. I had never played it or heard it before, you know, but the guys were saying, "Oh, it's you know, you'll be able to follow it." And so I played that one, and he was impressed with that I'm playing a new song that you know, he had just written. So things just kind of fell in place. And Freddie told me he wasn't quite sure about his playing with the drummer that he had. And you know, he was just thinking about something, you know, and I guess he was thinking about making a change. And after I sat in, he just said to me, "Do the guys have your number?" I said, "Yeah, George has my number, Junior Cook, they have my number." And 2 days later, I had gone back to Boston. 2 days later, George Cables called me and says, "Ralph, Freddie's getting ready to call you, you know. So if you're open and interested, you know, you might have this job." So that, too, was very wonderful and legendary, you know, 2 days later to get a call from Freddie Hubbard.
Just to be clear for the audience, I this was my favorite album of all time, Keep Your Soul Together, and the guys on the album, because I think what cued, even though I was not that nearly well versed as I am today, this is going back 15 years or so, I didn't recognize any, I mean, I knew George Cable's, but I didn't recognize the rhythm section, especially compared to the prior album, Red Clay. And just for the audience, Ralph already teed it up. This is some of the most smoking electric jazz. Remember, let's keep in mind here, we were transitioning from acoustic to electric, although I think Kent played the upright bass.
Definitely, yes, he did.
And so
he also played electric. He played both basses.
He played both. And before the wife and kids come home, let's open it up and take a listen to the new incarnation, the Freddie Hubbard Band, 1973. Kent Brinkley, Ralph Penland, Junior Cook, George Cables, Orel Ray, and Freddie Hubbard. Okay? Right there, my friend. What a beautiful...
I was thinking about something while you were playing that.
I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, some of the things, the rhythm section, what we were talking about when I came in the band, we were talking about ways of opening the music up. So when I was playing with Freddie, I was always very cognizant of what he was playing, and I was always trying to do a call and response type of thing with him. So I was literally listening to him and trying to answer him, and so there was a flow that was happening there. You know, when he would raise it, I would raise it, and so it was a definite dialogue. And I think he came to really appreciate that. You know, wow, these guys are really listening to me when I'm playing. You know, and if I take a breath or whatever, that they're going to respond. You know, so I think that was another one of the beautiful things that he was appreciating from the band. And certainly one of the things I was thinking about, I was definitely trying to think of ways of elevating what he was doing, what I was doing, and what we were doing as a band.
You know, in some ways, it's funny. I ran into a buddy of mine. They got a really smoking jazz group here in town, and you know, it's an electric group, and he's like, you know, I really like that Red Clay, the Freddie Hubbard, Red Clay stuff. Then I said, you know, the album you got to check out is "Keep Your Soul Together," man. That to me, I mean, that song. It's funny. Every one of them. I mean, from Brigitte to to the title track to Destiny to Spirits of Train, and it just seems like you guys were. It was fresh, which makes sense because it sounds like you just had really been with the band for only a short period of time. So it sounds incredibly razor's edge. But it also sounds, like you said, like everybody was listening to each other. I was going to say, even though we didn't get a chance to listen to all of George Cable's solo, his solo sounds like a call and response to Freddie's solo. I mean, it's just piggybacked. It's beautiful. And that ability to listen and work within the team construct and appreciate the accompanists, there's no doubt Freddie appreciated you as an accompanist for that sensitivity to listen and to not get too loud when he was too too soft, and vice versa.
Yeah, and the fact that we were playing every day, every week, you know, we played quite a bit, and we were working clubs, so we were doing like 7 nights a week. We'd do one club, and then we'd go to another city and do the same thing. So it was a great experience.
How did you deal with Freddie? On a night when because the stories that I'm told is that he could be the life of the party and talk up a storm and be an electric personality, and then if he didn't feel like talking, he just wouldn't talk.
I can't remember times of him not wanting to talk, so he was always
it just depended on what came out.
Yeah, I mean, there probably were moments when he was feeling a certain way and maybe he was talking less, but it was never a period where he was super quiet or just angry or mad or nothing like that. You know, it was all musical, and we were all too busy, you know, like at that time. We were working every week, so it was too busy to have any type of grudges or idiosyncrasies, because we know we had to go to the next city and play.
Right, and you had to get your. So you were going coast to coast. I mean, you were. What were some of the? Were they? I mean, in Boston, obviously, you had the Jazz Workshop, Paul's Mall, that kind of stuff. But talk about some of the. Like, did you get back to your hometown in Cincinnati to play with that group?
Yes, I did. This was early on too. In June, they had the major jazz festivals. So actually, when I joined Freddie, we were doing a bunch of jazz festivals first, and we may have done about a month or two of mostly music festivals, jazz festivals. That I seem to remember that came first. We did a bunch of festivals before we were doing the nightclub scene. And so that was great to be traveling all around, playing the major jazz festivals. We would sing all types of artists. Charles Mingus, I remember we did a concert and Charles Mingus was on the bill. One bill we did, Duke Ellington's band was on the bill. It was just so much music.
And it wasn't stratified to or try to appeal to a certain appeal to a certain type of person. I mean, it was just presented as it might be a festival, but I mean, really, people could go to that and their ears could be open to all sorts of different sounds, odd rhythm, time signatures. It wasn't just what people think a certain. I mean, I think that's part of what the struggle with jazz now is, that in order to it's a business and you got to make money. In order to do that, you need to covet those with money. And I know in Tucson, for instance, I mean, this is not subject to every, because I mean, there's still places in Los Angeles, New York, San Francisco, but people don't know what, or they think they have an idea of what jazz is, when in the past it was just music. I mean, you could hear it in all different ways.
And usually at a jazz festival, you hear different types of jazz within that festival. They're going to have all types of music. They'll have local musicians playing around town at other little events, and even they may open the festival. They may have the best local bands maybe open the jazz festival, and then it'll just progress. You have the different types of music. You'll have big bands and singers and instrumental music, and that's a good measuring stick to hear different types of jazzes at a jazz festival, because they have different types of music there.
Ralph, I have to tell you, I mean, to me, I would have been front and center at the darkest nightclub in the world. I mean, when you play Destiny's Children, which is a really fitting name, it just has a funky feel to it. You guys are really funky. I mean, to me, it was, you could really get down to that music, and people obviously understood that, because I have all these live recordings of that band from Ebbets Field and the Jazz Workshop, and I just try to figure out. I try to put myself back in that audience and that kind of scene. And it's impossible. I don't have a time machine, but I try to do it by interviewing you guys. And, at the time I just wanted to, best you could, talk about your emotional state. I'm sure you must have been you didn't have much time to think. Obviously you were playing a lot, but I mean, it was a great group. And I guess my question for you is, coming off of Red Clay, what do you think Freddie wanted as far as a band personnel lineup? I go back to this idea of the unsung hero, because I didn't recognize the rhythm section when I first got the CD, and then I put the music in, and it was just on the razor's edge. In your mind, what was he doing as far as a configuration of a band? What did he want to get out of that?
Well, you've got the person, Freddie Hubbard. You've got the songs that he wrote. He was writing a lot of songs. And there were several records between Red Clay and Keep Your Soul Together, and you mentioned Red Clay as like the album. That was like the very first album he did for CTI, was Red Clay. But he did several albums after that. You know, after Red Clay, there was Straight Life.
That's right. And you guys did some of that, Uncle Albert. You used to do some of that.
We did all the music. Everything Freddie wrote, he would play in person.
Sure.
So we did all of the music from all of the Red Clay albums. You know, Straight Life was the second record. I think the third one was called Povo. The third one was
First Light. First Light.
And then Povo.
Yeah.
And then after Povo, Keep Your Soul Together came out. And then later there was something that came out that he did prior to Keep Your Soul Together, and it was called Polar AC.
Yeah, Billy Cobham played drums on that one.
Polar AC, I think Billy might have been on it, and maybe even Lenny White might have been on a track or two. You're absolutely right. I mean, but I'm looking here, Van Gelder Studios, October 73. I thought Polar AC came out after that, but the other ones, Uncle Albert, Mr. Clean, Straight Life. Polar AC came out later, but it was recorded before Keep Your Soul Together, but it was not released. They held it in the can.
Right, and I guess that's the point, is that everything from First Light all the way through Polar AC, those were all the Creed Taylor cadre stables, and then all of a sudden, Freddie ripped the scab off and said, "No, I want my younger people playing."
Well, he was very proud of that particular band, and
Absolutely.
so I'm kind of honored, because when I joined the band, he was really now insisting, okay, I want to record this band, I want to record my band, and I've done your thing, Creed. I've done the all-star settings, you know, but we're making some head ground. We're starting to make a statement with this band, and in his opinion, the players in the band were on a level with the players from those other records, you know. So I feel honored that I was included in being a part of that, you know.
Yeah, and I feel honored to be able to be able to interview you. I mean, it's true. There's no doubt in my mind, as I listen to this stuff. I mean, in fact, it sounded fresher. Red Clay was, and rightfully so, spectacular. Straight Life, I can take it or leave it, and the First Light stuff, once you got the strings in there and stuff, I wasn't going to do it for me. This was clearly a job where Freddie Hubbard, based on his name recognition alone, said, I want my people, my younger people, to get their sound out, because you know what? This stuff is rocking. And he knew exactly what was going on. And it's really interesting, Ralph, because, one final thing on Keep Your Soul Together. One thing with my ear now is much different. This, I couldn't help but notice that this guy, Juno Lewis, playing percussion, he's coming out of one channel, and you're coming out of the other channel.
Yeah, Juno Lewis, a very great percussionist who was from L.A., and Juno Lewis appeared on the John Coltrane album, Kulu Se Mama, and also on another outtake, another record called Selfishness. So Juno Lewis, a great percussionist, and he was traveling with the band, and we were on the road traveling. Juno did some concerts with us, and so when Freddie went into the studio, he's like, well, I'm going to bring Juno with me. He's in the band. We're on the road. We're getting ready to go in the studio. So Juno Lewis, a great percussionist.
And he's playing. He's
incredible.
Yeah, I mean, literally down to the specialized percussive instrument, the Daka Doom and the Daka de Bello. And talk a little bit about, because then after that album, you guys are touring all over the place, and then what we played at the beginning of the interview was Camel Rise, which came off High Energy.
Which was, he had changed record labels by that period.
He was on Columbia at that point.
Keep Your Soul Together, and then he was working on a deal, and he switched over to Columbia Records. And I don't know, maybe they offered him more money or better, whatever, distribution, I don't know, but we definitely switched record labels after that, Keep Your Soul. So Keep Your Soul Together was the last record. he did for CTI, and then we went over to Columbia.
When I take my 1-month-old daughter on a long walk every day at about 4:30 or 5, when the sun is hitting the Catalina Mountains in Tucson, Camel Rise is teed up on YouTube through the headphones, and you guys are still living on the edge at that point. I mean, although I will say, Columbia did its best to bring in a lot of very professional musicians for that gig. Guys like George Bohannon, Pete Chrislieb, King Harrison, Victor Feldman, Dean Parks, Joe Sample. But the underlying part is that the majority of the tracks, it's still the quintet.
Right. It was the quintet with just expandedness around us. Yeah.
What do you remember about, so in that session, that was also done in New York, and you just had a situation where it was almost like just having a big band, with the exception of Harvey Mason. Yeah.
Actually, that was done in Los Angeles. High Energy was done in Los Angeles.
It says here, recorded completely live at Sunset Sound Records, Hollywood, California, in the 4 days between April 29th and May 2nd, 1974.
Right.
Again, let's keep.
You just said right there, California. Yeah.
Exactly. Let's just keep in mind here. Ralph Penland was still a veritable baby at 23, 24 at this point.
20 or 21.
20 or 21 years old. Oh, Mazel tov, man. So you were living on had you moved out to the West Coast at this point, or were you still in Boston?
No, I was living in the West Coast by then.
And you were vigorously touring with Freddie, but at this point, were you also playing with other groups as well, like when you were staying local?
No, it was still exclusively Freddie, because he was still traveling quite a bit. Yeah.
And you, and so once, and High Energy, I mean, it's really just an incredible. I mean, it's not on the same par as Keep Your Soul Together, but it's pretty darn close. And after that recording, talk about your relationship with the band and where your career went in those next couple years following that.
Well, the High Energy record was definitely kind of towards the end of that particular era, because things were changing, and even the band was about to change. The first guy to leave the band was Kent Brinkley, and I think he had an offer to join up with the Crusaders, if I'm not mistaken. I'm hoping I've got my timing.
Hey, Ralph, I want to tell you something. My family just came home.
Okay.
Let's pick this up soon, brother. This is great.
No problem.
All right, brother.
Good talking to you.
You too, man.